I guess we'll start and welcome everybody. We're really excited that you're here. First of all, I want to introduce our guest tonight. I'm very excited to introduce Amy Brenneman. Amy, you're an actor and a director and a producer and an activist and an advocate, and you're here tonight as a mom for an amazing young woman with complex learning challenges. And want to welcome you.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. This is like my favorite thing. It's like just to see that chat. It's so cool.
It is great. And we've got a really great audience. Next slide, Janine, thanks. And Danielle Mini. Danielle, I'm so glad you're here. You're a blogger, an activist, a writer, a special ed teacher. You're an immigrant. You're a powerful woman like Amy. And I'm just honored that you're here tonight. Thank you, Daniela.
And thank you so much for inviting me. It's
So
my
when I
pleasure to be here.
Oh, we're so happy you're here. When I thought about how we would start off the transition talks for 2025, I just had this vision that we would have a parent panel. And I immediately thought of you, Amy and Daniela, because we've worked together in the past. We're connected through our work in the past at the Riverview School, where we were all alumni. I worked there for 15 years. Daniela, your son Diego was there. And Charlotte, Amy, your daughter, went to Riverview. And we've continued to stay connected. One thing that I want to say to the families who are on tonight is that we're building a community. And we talk about building a community a lot in transition talks and in our housing webinars, because as we will see tonight, the community experience is so empowering. And what parents share amongst each other really supports each other, and it fuels a dialogue, and it fuels the energy of parents to just continue to go forward. So I really want to honor that and express my gratitude for both of you being here tonight. I went to a transition program to become a certified transition specialist, but what I really learned is the classroom of learning with parents, and you've all taught me so much. So without further ado, I thought what we could do today is start off, Danielle and Amy, sharing a little bit about your adult children, who they are, where they are, and tell us a little bit about them. Danielle, do you want to go first?
Sure. My son Diego, I have two sons. Diego has special needs and my other son Andres doesn't. Diego's 31 years old. He's diagnosed with autism. He also has an intellectual disability and bipolar one, which means that he's only gone through episodes of mania, if you being, having mania. And he is 31. He lives in Connecticut, in the same town that we live. He's very, very proud to have two jobs at two cafes. One is a training platform for individuals with special needs, and the other one is the Greenwich Library Cafe. He's involved in a good number of activities, for especially social activities. He's funny young man who likes to run and spend time with people he loves, and who feels that he has a great deal of purpose in life.
Thank you, Amy. You seem to resonate with that. Tell us about Charlotte.
Yeah, I just this has been such a fun thing to get to know Danielle a little bit and her amazing Instagram. And Charlotte is 23. She graduated from the Riverview School Grow program in 2023. She lives in Hyannis, Massachusetts, in an apartment building with well, between the two buildings, there's nine young adults that live with support, and one of the apartments is for an overnight support, but she's much more than that. She works at a store that she can walk to. She's really involved with the arts, so she was an intern at the Katuitt Center for the Arts and has been in plays and worked on plays. And she gets one-on-one services. And yeah, we split our time between California and Martha's Vineyard, so she was very familiar with the East Coast, and she refers to her apartment as home. She talks about, I'm going to visit California, I'm going to visit Martha's Vineyard, but when I go home, that is her apartment.
Thank you. And when I think about both of your adult children, whom I've known for many years, when you look at maybe thinking about the age of 14 and looking at now, what's been real different and what has happened or what has just shocked you in that journey and how they've shifted and changed?
Okay, I'll go. I'll go. Well, Diego has changed so much since he was 14, from 14 to even 25 and 30. 14, and I don't know if anybody in the audience has a child who's an adolescent. 14 was right in the middle of some of the most difficult years for Diego. And so not only has he changed, but I've also changed. 14 was also a time when I wanted Diego to be different, when I didn't accept truly that his disability was significant and forever. So neither he nor I were in a good place. So over the years, and especially from Riverview and then after Riverview, he has matured a great deal. I mean, he definitely got over the adolescent years, which were very difficult due to hormones, medication issues, school and special education issues, but also he's more, I think, at peace and happy with who he is, also because his family, and especially me in particular, have come to celebrate him for who he is. And one of the great things that I have found, as part of that transition from school age, if you will, from special education to adult services, is that you're not constantly trying, you're not constantly living from IEP to IEP, from evaluation to evaluation, but you almost settle into a rhythm of working towards building on your child. I mean, that's been my experience, building on Diego's strengths and trying to figure out where he fits in and giving him the opportunities to flourish and to keep growing. And the more I find that I've been at peace with who he is, the more I've been able to help him grow and make the most of all of the services and supports that are available to him. So
what was the shift for you?
The shift for me, I have to say that I had the opportunity for Diego to be at Riverview. And I think that gave me the breathing space in a way, that opportunity, the breathing room and the space to reflect and also see a community at Riverview of individuals who were great role models for Diego and who left Riverview full of different possibilities that were completely different from the possibilities that, as a mother, one always thinks is the traditional path for their children. Like, you always think the way to be happy for an individual is to go to college, get a job, find a partner, and that's the only way that you will feel like you are living a life of purpose and a rewarding life. And I think it was during those years, from like 19 to 21, and also over the years, that I've just discovered what an incredible life and what a purposeful life and what a happy life and a life full of love and joy a person can have when they have a disability such as Diego's. I would say that that also Diego is everybody thinks their children are special, but I think he's extremely special because he's from another world. He has this capacity for love that I find quite extraordinary, and he brings everybody in the family together. He himself is able to build community. But in the end, what I want to try to convey is that maybe he always was like that, or he's had that in him the whole time, but I didn't see it fully. I didn't embrace it fully. So life, most of your life happens after you're 22, hopefully, right? But we're before that age, you're always thinking that everything's so important. If you don't do it now, it's not gonna happen, and you just live in constant stress. And I think after they age out of those years, and you're not hearing what other people are supposed to be doing and other people do, you find much more inner peace.
Thank you, Danielle.
And yeah, anyway, thank
You
you.
know, I think it's important to talk about Riverview School is a residential school on Cape Cod for children ages 11 to 22 with complex learning challenges. But I think the emphasis here is that a transition program, if it's available to you, and remember, all of our kids are entitled to a free and appropriate education to 21 or 22. That's called entitlement. You want to take advantage because those transition programs are so instrumental in providing the skill building. Amy, I'd love you to jump in and kind of, share what your feelings were. What was the shift for you? It feels like, Daniela, you were going through the motions of the IEP and the evaluations and the assessments, and all of a sudden you had this awareness of who Diego really was and shifted your perspective based on the experiences of connecting with other people and seeing Diego thrive in a transition program. How was it for you, Amy?
I feel like this is the second or third time Daniela's just articulated something perfectly. Like the other day when you said, "Oh, it was just such a beautiful moment when Diego wasn't assessed every 5 minutes." I mean, it's horrible. I mean, the IEPs are horrible. And then you throw in the neuropsych and then it's just, and Charlotte was always at the shitty end of it. I mean, it's like, it was awful, just awful way to live. Yeah. And I think what you just articulated is, and there's great educators and there's great things about it, but essentially in 14, I'm so glad you mentioned, because it's like she was a problem to be solved, and she was a problem, and if there was a magic thing, or and I will also say she was in a fully inclusive, wonderful charter school. There were many, many wonderful things about our charter school. It's called Chime Charter. It's in Woodland Hills, California. Incredible in many ways, but the special needs kid, the IEP kids, I'll call them, were sort of in the minority. And so we were constantly like knocking at the door of normal, and it's like, oh, and her, girlfriends, she just started more and more wanting to hang out with the other IEP kids because it was less stressful, right? I mean, she couldn't keep up. And so I think similarly, for us, so we got, Charlotte has a rare chromosomal diagnosis. I think there's somebody here from Phelan-McDermott syndrome. I mean, very rare. So she was 15. We did not have an umbrella diagnosis. So we were, doing all the things that needed to be done in speech and this and that, but there was no club that we belonged to. And so I think when she was 15, a couple things happened. One is, when I called up, because we tried to get an assessment forever, a diagnosis, and we never got one. And then we did. And I remember calling up my brother, and we were weeping, and he was like, "Oh my God, it's like she's been running a marathon with one leg." And I realized I'd been comparing her to the wrong people. And then suddenly as Daniela articulated so beautifully, I saw her as a complete human, just the way I am. And I wanted to give her supports, but she herself wasn't defective. And then also right around that time, she went to her first summer at Riverview, and I saw with peers that were similarly situated to her stress level went down, and then she could learn more. And she wasn't the outsider, and that when I first heard, that phrase of, this tricky thing of inclusion, and of course, by rights, people should be where they want to be, and yet at a certain age, when you said most kids are bullied, ghosted, or mascots, and I was like, oh. And then when she got to Riverview, there was a level playing field. There just was. And then I got to meet awesome parents and people like you, and it just became, and the other thing I'll throw in there is, similarly to Daniela, I went to college, and here I mean, it's really dissecting ableism, right? It's like success looks a certain way, and got to go to college, and oh my God. And also at 19 she started high school, and they said, are you okay if she doesn't get a high school diploma in 3 years? I said, yeah. And that was a weight lifted, you know? It's like she's not going to freaking do algebra. It's just not going to, you know. But I think that oh, I just lost my train of thought. Anyway, oh yeah, I know what it was. I knew, so I'm an artist. I'm a working artist. I work with people that I don't know if they went to college or not, you know, if we're on a set and they're brilliant, a designer, like so my I knew my soul was really open to all sorts. I love all sorts of people. I don't want all my friends to go to college, but I couldn't quite connect that to my daughter until she got older. And then it was like, oh, let's get you the supports you need, but you yourself are not a problem to be solved anymore. It just shifted in time.
Almost like you both had this awareness of just allowing it to unfold, allowing it to be. We talked about holding the vision and trusting the process, the mantra that kind of aligns us with, a focus moving forward. But as I look at both of your adult children, they've kind of created their own journey. Right. So Charlotte lives in her own apartment. She has supports. She has some supported employment. She goes to a community-based day programming and she's thriving in her own ways, but there's still hiccups and there's still challenges, right? And so it doesn't mean like all of a sudden when they turn 22 and they get launched to whatever the next step is, it doesn't mean that it ends. So you're still kind of on this journey. Would you say the same thing, Daniela?
Yeah, yes. But it's a different journey that we're approaching a different way. I joke with my husband, Diego's dad, that we run like a little nonprofit, family nonprofit called Diego Inc. because it is a lot of work managing all the benefits and that supports that we have been able, thankfully, we have been able to access for Diego is like I said, like running a little operation. And but I do it like differently than the IEP process. I think I'm far more settled and it's a less stressful process. But it does involve, for parents out there, I just don't want to sugarcoat the fact that it involves a lot of work. There's forms to fill out every year. There's constantly benefits to update. There's staff, like I say, staff come and staff go. There's a lot of logistics and many moving parts. If you want later, I'll kind of more list what those moving parts are if you think that the audience is interested. But yeah, it is a whole lot. But
So
I'm
with
glad that we have them, and I'm grateful that we have them.
Yeah, and Danielle, you're a special ed teacher from your background, so you have a greater awareness. And remember, parents, you know what you know. That's why tapping into webinars on transition and meeting with families and women like Amy and Danielle are so empowering because they're giving you a lens and a look at, what are potentials and changing your perspective to hopefully bring some more inspiration and hope. But something that I want to say is, so the IEP, it's sort of like, and you're entitled for this, right? It's guaranteed, it's a legal document, everything's sort of set in place. But all of a sudden it shifts, and you have to look at this whole new world called adult services, and you have to get eligible for adult services. It just doesn't happen. And it's another sort of battle, right? It's another obstacle, it's another process to learn. So, with that said, how do you look at transition? And if you know now, wish you knew then, what would you say differently? I'm kind of shifting from our script a little. I have this like thing that we talked about, but it just feels like we're kind of moving around. We're ad-libbing, right? Is that how you say it in the Hollywood terms, Amy?
Yeah, baby. The first thing that comes to mind is, and it's funny thinking because I'm collaborative by nature. I'm in a collaborative art form, and I like to work with people. I haven't done anything alone, starting with, like people like you, Anne, but and silver lining of COVID, Charlotte started the transition program the fall of 2020. And Riverview did COVID quite well, actually. We were in California, but we were Zooming. No, first of all, nobody was on the campus. We were Zooming constantly. So I can honestly say when she was 18, this cohort of parents that I'm still with and maybe with for many, many years to come came together. And we just started researching. And the thing is, I guess I knew, and this was an aha moment just for me today. I'm a working artist, meaning I can't make Charlotte my full-time job. There's some parents that can and do it brilliantly. I knew I would really resent if that was the only thing I was doing. So I think from really as soon as Charlotte got some independence, it was good for her and it was good for me. And it allowed us to really respect each other. So I even though there was this kind of like, don't let them come home. I mean, I don't hundred who, things don't come together in the right time. People can come home, but I think that we really this cohort, a lot of the same nine kids met. Us parents met in the fall of 2020. So, getting to answering your question, Anne. I didn't know anything, but I was like, how about this? How about that? Oh, I've heard this, or I've heard like it was such a hive mind, and it kind of still is. I wouldn't be so great. I would get spaced out and overwhelmed if I was alone, but I think Charlotte has a cohort and I have a cohort. And that's really how a lot of this information gets passed around because also, as Daniela will attest, it changes all the time, right? It's like, oh, the state just passed this, or there's a new, federal government, or it's just constantly changing. So I think I have other parents that are in it with me. We have experts, but we also have each other.
But also your adult children are both changing. Amy, Charlotte will change. Maybe she has some medical issues that come up, or maybe there's some challenges with the roommate, or
Life
whatever.
keeps going. Yeah.
These are I think they're called in the catastrophe of life, the suffering, the bardo, whatever. It's like life happens, and it happens to our kids as well, because they're part of this human experience.
I'll just dive in with this one example. Charlotte, overall, her health is really solid, but there's one thing, and I'm sure everybody on the Zoom can think of the one thing. It's like, oh, when that thing comes up, whether it's a seizure disorder or whatever. And so there was a one thing that I always was worried about, and if I was 3,000 miles away. So last spring, the thing came up, and I was opening a play that night. And I was like, oh my God, this is, when I would lie in bed at night, I was like, and I called up the overnight support, Nikki, and I was like, hey, can you get over there? She's like, yep, no problem. The thing ended up not being disastrous, but I think, and now we're stronger for it. I was like, wow, the thing that I was afraid of happened when I was 3,000 miles away, and we figured it out, and it gives you that much more confidence about, okay, life is going to keep happening. It's just going to keep happening.
So here's the talk that we're having tonight, and we'll segue to you, Daniela, is letting go and stepping back. How difficult or how easy it is to work with people that you're trusting from afar. So Daniel, I know Diego's transitioned slowly to his living experience. He stayed home for a couple of nights a week. He went to his apartment a couple of nights a week. Obviously, the staffing could be either amazing or maybe not so great. There's challenges with staffing. We want to honor and respect people that are in the industry who are supporting our kids, but we also know there's a shortage. And we also know that some of the people come with less skills or maybe not the empathy or understanding we would like them to have. How is it letting go and trusting other people? Danielle, do you want to jump on that?
Yeah. First, I want to say that any transition and stepping back and letting go, there's no one size fits all, not one right way. It depends also on where you come from, your background. I just want to put out there that I'm from a Latin family where everybody's very close and everybody's in everybody's business all the time. I would say, and I have a large extended family, and I would say that we're pathologically close. And so just like Amy, she had her cohort of other parents. I have my family that gives me a lot of support. And so for me, I would say that I'm in the extreme end, or close to the extreme end of the parent for whom it is very hard to step back and let go. But I'm proud of myself because I've been able to do it, because I know it is ultimately much, much better for Diego. And so we actually got too lucky, if you will, because we signed Diego up for a Section 8 apartment. I don't know if people know what the Section 8 community housing voucher program. where you get a subsidized rent apartment. And so we signed up, and it's very, very unlikely to get to the top of that list and be given an apartment. So you sign up and you hope that maybe in 10 years, who knows, or 15 years, someday it'll happen. And then much sooner than we expected, when Diego was it was during COVID. So yeah, like 26, all of a sudden Diego had a voucher. And so I wasn't mentally ready or, prepared to go through the process of stepping back and letting go and having, and for him to move out. But so in our case, for that reason, it was quite gradual. First, it was one night a week. And then I will say that finding a roommate, he had this accommodation. It was a 2-bedroom apartment because he was allowed to have a roommate. And believe it or not, even if you put the word out that there's free rent, not even utilities, the roommate only has to pay for internet or half the internet. And it's really hard to find people who would like to be the roommate. It was hard for us to find a roommate for Diego. So anyhow, for us, for that reason, because of where I come from and my background, our process was slow and gradual. But it's even if you go slowly, you can go far. And over the years, Diego has been staying at his apartment more and more, to the point where he's with us just on the weekends and then goes back to his apartment. And so far he has had 2 different roommates over how many years? So it happens, we're 2025. Yeah, it's been 4 years, and he's only had 2 roommates. So after we have found a roommate, we have gotten lucky. And with Diego, it's easy to know when the staff is working out, because he's very vocal and he will let us know. And we've only had one experience where one staff didn't work out, and we knew right away because Diego didn't like him. And Diego usually really likes people, so we could tell right away that wasn't a good match. And lastly, when it comes to trusting, strangers to be, living with your child, you just you have to do it. You have the references, and then your child will tell you if they're having fun. I mean, you will know, but it is a little bit difficult at first. The last thing that I wanted to say about that is that it's not necessarily a bad thing for staff to change, because when somebody's with Diego for a long time, they might get into I don't know, I would say unhelpful dynamics. And, so it's great to have fresh people start who don't let him get away with things, if you will, or have higher expectations. So in the end, it works out when you have people come and go. But of course, not every month, but after a year and a half, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Amy, so your situation was that Charlotte is in a shared living situation with a roommate in a house with other peers, and there's an overnight emergency support. But you have staff during the day who provide the individual supports and life coaching kind of model. Can you talk about how that shift has been for you as a parent to let that person kind of take over and from afar?
For sure. So it's slightly different than Danielle. It sounds like we work with Life, Living Independently Forever, which is a service provider on the Cape. So we kind of get our staff from them, although we are an individual support. We started out as a group. We were trying to do group hours because it was going to be, but capitalism doesn't like sharing. Like, it just never worked. So we are an individual supports house, which means people don't have to work with Life, and some people don't. We've had but what I like about that is sort of what Daniela was saying. They vet the people for us, not to say they're all great, right? But there is a pipeline of people. And I really like multiple people. I really appreciate what Daniela just said. I think it's one of the staff that Shar has, they have a really fun time, but there's sort of a limitation there. But there's other people to fill in too. So I kind of, it's funny, even when my kids were really little, I never wanted them to get super attached to any one nanny. Partly because I was insecure, but partly because it's like, well, that person's going to go, or you know what I mean? I just, when it's too much based on that one individual, I get nervous. So I actually kind of like that there's a flow of people. But I can't say enough, talk about getting lucky. Our overnight support, and it's not even, is this wonderful woman, Nikki Baldwin, who was Charlotte's transition teacher at Riverview. And her sort of like you, Anne, I mean, when you meet people who really love young adults and adults in general, right? So it's not just like they're not school teachers, it's a different thing, and people like you, Anne, and Nikki, it's really about making it's a whole life vision. And that's really who Nikki is. So she has an apartment. So that's why we're not a group home. So I was sort of deputized with talking to the state of Massachusetts to make sure that we were not a group home. And the reason we're not a group home, even though we have 9 kids or 6 kids, is because there's no more than two. You probably know this. The bottom line rule: you can't have more than 3 people who are receiving services in one home. Otherwise, it's a whole different other legal thing. So we have our kids have their own locks and their own kitchens, and there's only actually at this point 2 in each apartment. And then Nikki has her apartment. And so, one thing, because they'd all come from Riverview and they'd literally come from dorm life, people had their doors open. And it was, my daughter gets really overwhelmed when it's loud. And so this whole idea, it's like, it's not a dorm. These are apartments, right? And so what does that mean? Well, it means most adults in apartment buildings close their door, and then you can knock on the door. And, so it's, but Nikki has been a ground for all of us, and I'm just thrilled that she also is enjoying this, and her role may change a bit. But getting back to this, and I also want to, I really want to shout out to the people whose children may be nonverbal or may have really complex medical. A really, really good friend of mine, her daughter has cerebral palsy and is nonverbal, and she is launching her, but she's much, gets nervous because there's just medical stuff, that need to be handled. I have a kid who, sort of like Diego, for the most part, will tell me and is verbal, and so can tell me. So, but you know what? She can't articulate perfectly well some things, but again, that's why the cohort thing has worked really well for all of us, because sometimes I'll get, a housemate on the phone. I was like, hey, Shar said this, what actually happened, sort of between all of them, you can get the coherent story. But again, that's really been a big part of this story is the group of the residents and the group of the parents.
So both of you have been talking about different housing models, and coincidentally, we're in the midst of a 4-part housing series that my colleagues can put the link if you'd like to register. So you'll be able to see the last part of the series to learn more about housing opportunities, but also listen to the recordings, because Amy's experience is shared living with support. These are all peers of Charlotte, so intellectual disabilities, and also there's a person from the community who resides for the overnight emergency supports. But Diego accessed funding through the state of Connecticut to have a Section 8 voucher, and that's subsidized housing. That's something that's available across the country in every state. And our housing series, we talk about that. So Diana and other people are asking the great question about housing. We would love you to join our last seminar, which will be on the 28th, and to learn more about housing opportunities. So something I want to dive into is both of you went kind of public. Amy, let's be honest, you're a very famous person. I've been, watching you on TV and film for many, many years. And Daniela, your blog is just growing, and I'm watching all your followers, and I'm watching you talk about, your hair and life and everything. And it's just amazing. And I thought, what is it like to go public with your story? So Amy, talking about Overcome, tell us about that, and how that defined you and how it shaped others, because it certainly impacted me profoundly.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Overcome is a piece of theater that's really about everything that we're talking about, and particularly that moment that Daniela articulated so beautifully of getting out of the microscope of the IEPs and the this and the that, and then realizing what is this? And it's really what I call ableism or the tyranny of normal. It's sort of like in the way it limits all of us. So I'm a creator. I mean, and I just was overwhelmed. I just started writing down, verbatim these IEPs. And it's not even because they were so terrible. I mean, we actually didn't have anything particularly tragic, but, it's like this Byzantine, and I was a working mom. I was just like, this is kind of hilarious and really intense. And really the prompt for the piece was, there was this neuropsych. She was in eighth grade, again, that 14 moment. And this neuropsych was going to figure it out, right? And it was going to just have all these answers. And it was a horrible process. Poor thing, poor Shar. And it revealed nothing. And reading these neuropsychs is devastating. It's just absolutely devastating. And I remember sitting on the swing in my house in California and just weeping and reading this thing. And just because I'm a freaky creator, I was like, one day I'm going to do a Star Wars crawl of everything they say is wrong with her, and I'm going to dance in front of it. I'm going to create a piece of theater from this moment. And I did. And it's really a super satisfying moment to play for me. What's interesting is it really wasn't about Charlotte. It was about my being a kind of crappy ally and getting to be a better ally. She wasn't in the piece. And I always, and my collaborator, my brilliant collaborator who I've known for a long time, she said, you should Charlotte be in the play? I was like, she can write her own play. Like, I ever want to put in words of like, no. But what happened very organically is we were working on it a couple years ago, and Shar was, well, there's a terrible moment in the play where I scream at her. I just like lose, and she in the play is represented by dancers, and it's sort of abstracted. And my friend Sabrina, who's known Charlotte since the day she was born, said, "Hey, Aim, do you want to give Shar a heads up about the scene that's coming?" So I turned to I think she was 16. Oh, no, no, no. No, she was like 17 or 18. And I said to her, I was like, oh, yeah. I was like, I wrote a scene about when you didn't have words and I didn't know how to help you. And we were both really frustrated. And she understood. And then what happens now at the end of the play is she comes on stage with me, and it sort of blesses the whole thing because in the play, have been talking about this problem, which is my child, and if I got to solve the problem, and then she comes out in all her beauty and agency, and it's like very like what Daniela said. It's like I couldn't see her before, and now I do. So it's a powerful experience for us, and I'm protective of her because I'm a public figure. I mean, the Phelan McDermott folks may go like, why, because I was like, I don't. I mean, now I feel like now that she's launched and an adult, and we're so grateful for, for the diagnosis, I feel differently. But she also has a very rare endocrine disorder, which is Brad and I are recessive carriers of this thing. And I just remember getting, I was on a TV show at the time and just getting like clobbered by the endocrine disorder lady. And it was like, will you be the public face of this thing? And I was like, no, I can't, so it's this, um, but I think that now that she's an adult, I feel much more confident about, and super proud of her. And the response to the piece of theater, frankly, makes me know that the more we tell our stories, like Danielle is doing, the more community we build, it just gets more and more robust.
Kathy asks, how can they see the production? And if you're in the New England area, Amy, February 26th, you'll be at the Katuitt Center for the Arts showing the film and hosting and narrating. But I know you and I have talked about maybe another performance somewhere in New York or Boston in the future. So can we cross our fingers that might happen?
Yeah, yeah, I think I can say this out loud. I will be developing it at the American Repertory Theater and then taking it to the Perelman Center in New York. These things take a long time, but yeah, this we are very inspired by the response, and frankly, people like you, Anne. Not only as a viewer, but as a professional. That you find it useful is very meaningful to me.
Well, it's so powerful because Amy tells her story from holding a baby and the lack of awareness or understanding of what's going on, with all these professionals saying something different and all the voices saying this is what you should do and this is what's wrong. But finally, you finally get the diagnosis in her teens. And then the culmination of Charlotte being in the production, surrounded by all the people who are telling the story with you. It was just really beautiful and moving.
Oh,
And Daniela, you have a blog and an Instagram, and Daniela, if you wouldn't mind in the chat, putting the link to your Instagram, because I think we could probably get 100 more followers. And also, Amy, if you want to put your post, anything that you want to share, we already have a few things in the slides, but Daniela, your blog's pretty incredible and it really features Diego. And I was just wondering, Diego being front and center in the blog, how does he respond to it? And I know Diego's here tonight, but I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, he's very funny about it. He loves to be, he always tells me, put this on Instagram, put that on Instagram. And now I'm actually writing a memoir and it's very far along in it. And when he's home, he totally respects not interrupting me because like he'll say to his dad, mom's writing a book about me. So he welcomes it and he actually loves it. And like Amy, I mean, I started to write about Diego in 2019. And originally I started to write only about him. Then I started to write about a whole bunch of other things. And it was more than about him, it was about me and how my journey from the person that I was to the person that I've become, and also working out all the terrible things that I thought that I had done to Diego and to myself. And now, after many years, being able to look from a distance, that forgiving myself and working through them and writing about them. And also at the same time, discovering the wonder of Diego's mind and the wisdom of his thinking and the beauty in his language, and writing about that because I thought it was something that other people might want to read about, because I think it's fantastic, it's amazing, it's incredible to me that kind of mind exists. And what I was gonna say, the response, people have only responded positively to what I write about Diego, and he's a little bit, he's somewhat of a character, so a lot of people love looking at all the little video clips of the funny things that he says. And the other reason why I started to write about him is that when Diego was growing up, I would hang on to any article or memoir that I would read about children and parents who were so heroic and their kids had recovered from their disability and they were now, going to college and getting a PhD or, all those things. And I was like, and I always thought Diego's going to be one of those because I'm working so hard so that Diego can become one of those. And so Diego is certainly not, wasn't that kind. I thought that was the success story and that was it. So
I can't stand that story. I can't stand
and so
that story.
everybody was making, right, people were making all of the good decisions and sacrificing everything. And so one of the reasons I was writing like the antidote or the anti-story or the counter story, because those are the exceptions. I like really, really exceptions. I would say that we are the rule, but the rule is great too. And anyway, so that was the other reason why I started to write about it, to make sense of that.
Yeah.
You both talk about the human experience, and I know, Amy, when we were talking about what we wanted to talk about, you talked about the meltdowns and how you felt so ashamed and you were, maybe embarrassed by the experience of a meltdown. I mean, I think we all
Maybe.
are parents.
Very
And
embarrassed.
and and Danielle, you speak about forgiving yourself. There's a lot of grace there, and nobody really talks about that in the special ed experience to parents. That, it almost as if you're supposed to just always be on. You're supposed to know how to talk in the IEP meeting. You're supposed to know how to deal with the information given the assessments, but that's not real, is it?
I mean, it's funny so I was doing my show Judging Amy when I had Charlotte, and a lot of the moms that I met, and dads, but it's mostly moms and younger years, had given, it was their full-time job, right? They gave, and understandably so. And I probably would have given up my job, except I would have been breaking a contract and CBS would have sued me. So I always felt behind. I was like, oh my God, everybody knows other things more, and oh my gosh, and um, but I have a different perspective now. I think that distance and the fact that I had a job, for me, everybody's different. I just would have been all over. I don't know. It would have been terrible. I would have been like, my life would have gotten really small. It would not good for Charlotte. Um, yeah, and then the emotional stuff I mean, we just made a med change, and Anne, you were, oh, this is what I was going to say. We had a raunchy moment a week and a half ago where she just, I mean, she was also premenstrual, but there was some other stuff going on too. But she just had a really old style, this is what's so humbling. It's like, well, we don't have meltdowns anymore, except for last Saturday. Like, that was pretty bad. And Brad and I were sort of done. It's like you have your tools and you sort of have used them up. And then I texted Nikki. I was like, hey, you around? And what was incredible is Nikki came over, and Charlotte immediately could hear Nikki because Nikki's more current with her. They live together, right? So she, not only was she not the mom, but it's like, I have only, it takes a village, I've always known I am not the person sometimes, often, so that fresh energy, that fresh horses, um,
But you also knew to step back and let go. You knew that somebody else needed to take over.
yeah, I mean, it was pretty obvious. But what is different now, and it's so gratifying because, again, to Daniela's earlier point, Charlotte now is just a young adult, just like I'm an adult. I'm an old adult, right? So what we couldn't do, because she didn't have the language for it when she was young, but like the day after the meltdown, we had a really nice quiet day, and she was like, "Wow, I really yelled." I was like, "Yeah, you did." And she, why do you think, we could, and and you got to see her that week too. And that's really all life is you're gonna have bad days, but then you reflect on it, try to do better. I mean, again, I feel like with the like one of the most, Charlotte has never had a behavior, I mean, she never had a behaviorist. She didn't really need one, but then I don't know, somewhere in there, like 10, 11, I was like, I need a behaviorist. So I got this woman who was the behaviorist of my friend whose son is on the autism, like totally different kind of guy, but I just wanted results. I wanted results. And it was terrible. It was like looking at Charlotte like literally a circus animal to be trained. I mean, it was so gross. The lack of humanity. But I just wanted the problem to be solved and never to think about it again. It's like, guess what? It's the human condition. There's going to be good days and bad days.
Yeah. So when you look back let's go back to age 2 to 5, and now looking at 31 and 24, 23 years old, can you believe where they're at? I mean, let's talk about that.
Uh, yeah, sure. Well, something that I was gonna say before I get into that is that wherever Diego is right now, and let's say the arrangements of his life, right now he's in his subsidized Section 8 apartment, but I've changed where I live and how I live over the decades. So I don't discount that maybe someday he'll be in an arrangement such as Charlotte's, and he might really prefer something like that in the future if we're able to have that come together. Just want to say that, so that I don't think of Diego being settled, or things will change over the years throughout his life. So 2 to 5, no. From 2 to 5, I completely thought Diego was going to be a person who went to college and got a master's and had money-making career. So, being his mom changed me, changed everything about my beliefs, about life and about disability and the value of life, all of those things. Because Diego's disability was not apparent uh, at 2. I mean, I was already taking him to be evaluated, but I thought it was something we're going to fix because he was going to have lots of therapy and then he was going to be okay. So it's been a completely different experience than I ever could have imagined in my wildest dreams. And yeah,
Yeah,
that's been the case for me.
exactly. I think yeah, I think it was just very binary. I just was a very limited person, honestly. It's like, and you go to college, and if you don't go to college, then your life's a failure. Like I just didn't even realize how I internaled ableism. Like I literally, it's like, oh my God. So when I would think, oh my, if she's not going to go to college, I would get panicky. I just couldn't have. And then meanwhile, I found these pictures that are so cute of my mother-in-law is on. Hi, Joyce, my beautiful Charlotte's beautiful grandma. She came to work with me every day, right? Because I worked all the time. And so you have these pictures of her on my hip, and, I'm looking at a script or talking to a director or doing whatever. And now she works backstage at a theater. Like it's in her bones. The path was there. Like, and her father's a filmmaker. Like we love stories. The other thing I want to say about Overcome is, I don't know if anybody here uses the tool of social stories, which basically after a meltdown, right? I'm a terrible visual artist, but I have my little stick fingers and you get to look at it, right? So it's not like, why did you do that? It's like, oh, check it out. What happened here, right? That's literally what Overcome is. I turned to Brad and I was like, oh my God, I wrote a social story. So I can look at it, right? And the fact that other people get something out of it is almost secondary. It's like, wow, what happened? Like, what happened? I did that when, after my mom passed away, it's like, I got to write down all these little chapters because in the moment they're so emotional. It's so intense. So I think something in Charlotte's DNA is very much a storyteller, and she's drawn to the theater, which is the theater is a naturally inclusive space. I think that's the other thing, Daniela, to your point about not getting assessed every 5 minutes. The other thing is like inclusion, even when it's done well, it's sort of hokey, right? But what are naturally inclusive spaces? Theaters are, right? I mean, you got people that went to college, didn't go to college. You got, it's just such a warm and welcoming space. So you get to sort of find those things that are natural, the natural supports, the naturally nice people. I mean, a really moving thing is like, while Charlotte does have paid staff, like a lot of her supports are unpaid. They're natural. We have in the bottom floor of this apartment building, there's commercial space. And the woman that runs the salon there is a natural support, right? If one of the kids gets locked out, she can help. It's just city living, where people are aware of one another. So I think, again, that's not disability. That's like being interdependent and being part of a community.
Community.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so before we start to wrap up, Daniela, where Charlotte has her theater connection with the natural supports that are embedded and just really embraced. I mean, I know one of the actors from Fiddler on the Roof, Kaylee, I think her name is. She works at the coffee shop. She always asked me, how's she doing? She's connected to her. And she knows I know her. So it's really about building those community connections. But Daniela, Diego's a runner. And that's another wonderful natural experience where, adaptive sports, it doesn't have to be running. It can be, adaptive skiing, adaptive, ball games or whatever, but he's a runner, right?
Yeah, a lot of people do Special Olympics, but for some reason, Diego decided he doesn't want to do Special Olympics anymore. And then we found this amazing organization called Achilles. It's international. They have chapters all over the US, and they also have international chapters. And they support people with all kinds of disabilities, from people with developmental disabilities to people who are, amputees or blind, to participate in races, and they assign them partners, and then they do races with them, and that has been one of the best discoveries we've made for Diego over the past 2 years. And it's at the beginning, because it's been years. I run as well, so for years I've been running with Diego, and it has been great to be able to step back and have Diego run with volunteers from Achilles and do races with them. I'll do my race and he does his race with the people from Achilles. But it's really funny because it also brings to mind something about community, because we've been living in the community where we live for so many years, and Diego has gotten to know a lot of people because he's also out and about in the community with his program, and when he goes to church with my mother, for example. So when I have met new volunteers, and I might go on a run with them and Diego, just to get them to know each other. And then Diego will say hi to people left and right, and he's like, "Oh my goodness, he's so popular! Everybody knows Diego." So it reminds me that there is a community around him that also looks out, for him and care. So yeah, that's nice to see.
Thank you. I wish we could continue. We could talk all night, but we must come to an end. I want to thank you both for sharing your story. Somebody wrote, "I need to have a life," and insert self-care. And I think it's important that you both have your careers and your pathways that you're following that's connected to your adult children. It's important that you have a life as well, and we want to honor that. But we also want to honor the activism and the advocacy, and for you coming tonight to share your story and your experience, so we can come away with just a gold nugget of hope and inspiration that maybe we can try something similar. Thank
Can I say one thing? I know we got to go.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
I think sometimes I think well, I think you'd asked me and Daniela what surprised us or what would we be surprised by. I think there's such a like falling off the cliff. Like there's just all this stuff built up about like it's terrifying. And I have a neurotypical 19-year-old son. It's like hard to adult, like no, even for neurotypical people. So I almost think like taking away, like I mean, of course, you switch over, as Daniela said, there's services that used to come through the school system. I mean, but I think that the assumption that it's going to be really grim and isolating, I just want to lift that. It doesn't have to be that way. Or if it's difficult, it was difficult, very difficult when I got out of college. I remember that acutely. I was like 23 years old, like I have no idea who I am or what to do. So not to always pathologize our special needs kiddos. It's like just part of the human cycle. And again, you reaching out and getting creative and listening to them.
Let them live, let them fail, let them be happy, let
Right.
them be sad, have a meltdown once in a while. It's life.
Yeah, maybe not that last part, but yeah, sure.
Oh, thank you so much. And
Thank you,
in
Anne.
our slides, which we're going to show right now, thanks, Janine, for putting up the slides. People are asking about how to see Overcome. You all have to come to the Cape. Danielle and I will be there. It's going to be on the 26th at the Katuitt Center for the Arts. And if you take out your camera right now, we'll hold the slide for a moment so you can scan the QR code. And I don't know, I got a really cheap ticket, Amy. I don't know, pretty happy about that. And I got a great,
Yeah, I think it's pay what you can, right?
yeah, pay what you can. So I do. And I saw the live performance, and if you all could take a field trip and join us, we would love to be all together. And the next slide, please. This is Public Ponder, and it's amazing. I love it. Daniela, just really brave and open. So take out your camera and scan that QR code. And Daniela did put in the chat that her Instagram is Public Ponder as well, and you've got to follow it. Diego's all over it. So next slide, please. We talked about transition programs, and we are starting one in July. It is a 5-day-a-week residential program, and it's for 18 to 22-year-olds. So if you want to scan the QR code to learn more about that. And the next slide, please. Sometimes we just need to talk to someone, and our transition team is available to talk to you one-on-one, depending upon what your topic is. We have experts in our team that can meet with you. So if you scan the QR code, it will take you to the link to set up your appointment. And our consultations initially are free, and then we also have a fee-for-service model as well. And it's all about empowering, which is what we did today. Next slide, please. And we do have a Facebook community, so get out your camera and please scan that. We'd love you to join. Talk about what's going on, what your questions are, something that you might want to share. Many of you who are on today, I saw your names are on our group, and we appreciate that. Thank you. Amy and Daniela, profound gratitude for today. Thank you for being here. And I wish all of you joy and prosperity and abundance and love for the new year. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. Good
Thanks,
night.
everybody.